Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me for another of my daily live streams. If you are watching live, I hope you had a fantastic weekend. I was a little bit busy, which is why you did not see me do as many live streams over the weekend. But it was a good busy. It was a good busy. And I have a really exciting announcement to make. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. First, I am working on a book. Yes. So if you follow me on TikTok or on Instagram, you may have seen my incredibly viral Iranian here series where I basically talk about various facts in the Middle East. Things about politics, things about Iran, things about Israel, and just basically giving a 101 Middle East 101 type of introduction, because there are a lot of people who want to learn more about the Middle East because it is constantly in the news. And of course, we're seeing all of these, pro-Palestine jihadis in Canada and United States, and of course, Europe as well. And, there's a lot of information out there. So, people have questions and they don't really necessarily know where to turn to. And, if you know nothing about the Middle East, it can definitely be, a little bit daunting. No surprise there. Some of my videos have millions of views. And it's really interesting because it's not just the views on my own social media accounts. I've also noticed that my videos from Instagram and TikTok are being downloaded and reshared on various social media websites. Like, for example, X, right? Like, I am constantly seeing my videos being uploaded by huge accounts, and then those views are in the hundreds of millions sometimes. But I just want to give you, an example of, one of my viral, Iranian here pro tip videos to kind of give you a sense. So this, here we go. Let me pull this one up here to give you a sense. So here's my Instagram. If you guys aren't following me on Instagram, make sure you do. It's, just G Gamari. You'll find me there. And so here's an example of one of my, Iranian here videos. This one on Instagram, I'll tell you how many views this one has. This one has, the one I'm about to share with you has 2.5 million views. Okay, so this video right here, 2.5 million views, 173,000 likes, and of course, over 4,000 comments. So let me just give you an example. If you haven't seen my Iranian here video series, my pro tips, you can go to my Instagram here on the highlights reel. I have all of them combined. But here, let me give you a brief little example here of the kind of things that I do in my short form content. Another pro tip for anyone. Wait, let me go back here. Iranian here with another pro tip for anyone who's not from the Middle East. Iran and the United States used to be huge allies until 1979, when Islam took over and turned our country into a 7th century Islamic hellhole governed by Sharia law. In fact, prior to 1979, a lot of Americans used to travel to Iran because it was the top destination in the Middle East for American travelers. It wasn't enough for those Islamic terrorists to take over my country of Iran. They're now coming into your country and bringing their Islamofascist ideology with them. And when we Iranians try to call it out, they accuse us of Islamophobia. And now you know. There you go. So there's an example of, one of my viral pro tips. Again, over 2.5 million views on Instagram alone. I think it's a similar number on TikTok. Now, if you are wondering where you can purchase my upcoming book, all you have to do is just go to Amazon, type in Goldie Gamari. Here, I'll show you. So type in Goldie Gamari, and you will see my book right here. It is actually available for pre-order. The link to purchase my book is in the video description as well on my YouTube. So if you are interested after the live stream, you want to do make a pre-order, you can. My book goes live on December 7. So just under a month, it's going to go live. And I'm incredibly excited to share it with you. It's always been one of my life goals to write a book. I was just waiting for, the right inspiration. And as soon as I saw that my, Iranian here pro tip videos are going viral across the world, it was like, this is it. This is the right time to do it. And this is the topic that I need to do it on. So for those of you who want to learn more about the Middle East, who, maybe don't know too much, maybe you're confused, you're trying to figure out what's going on, make sure to pre-order and check it out. Highly recommended. All right, guys. So we are going to go into, we're going to dive into Iran today. And I found a very interesting documentary. Not a documentary. It's an interview. I shouldn't say documentary. So this is a very interesting interview. And it's only from, about 4 months ago, right? So this is from the summer. And it only has 70,000 views, guys, 70,000 views. So we are going to watch this because this is a very important interview with His Royal Highness, King Reza Pahlavi. He is the Shah of Iran in exile. He is also the leader of the Iranian National Uprising, the official opposition. And, he just answers questions, very blunt questions. And, one of the questions that a lot of people have is, will the Islamic Republic survive? Will the dictatorship survive? And, what comes next? What comes after? Now, we do have a plan for the day after, and I will be getting into that plan in future episodes. But, this interview is incredibly eye-opening because it answers a lot of the questions that people have about Iran, about Iranian society, and also why Iranians are supporting His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi II. So let's dive into this here. I'm just going to read the description here for you. So in this exclusive interview, Bild Deputy Editor-in-Chief Paul Ronsheimer speaks with Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the late Shah of Iran. For many Iranians in exile, he represents a figure of hope and a leading voice of opposition to the Islamic Republic. Pahlavi, who now lives abroad, is calling for the regime's downfall. But can he deliver on that promise? Oh, gosh, I hate this. And can the son of an authoritarian monarch? So right away, we know that, again, they're trying to portray the Shah as this authoritarian figure. But if you have watched my evening live streams where we go through documentaries about the 1979 Islamic Revolution, where we talk about Iran prior to 1979, we have established very clearly that the Shah was not an authoritarian figure. In fact, Shahanshah Aryamer, God bless his soul, gave women the right to vote. So if he was an authoritarian figure, why the heck would an authoritarian figure give women the right to vote in 1963? The 4 women in Switzerland and Sweden and Portugal had the right to vote. So again, with this, tired, this tired trope that these people put out there without actually understanding Iranian history or really understanding, the truth about what happened. And, again, this is why my book is going to be so incredibly important, because it counters this sort of disinformation and misinformation. But having said that, let's get started with this with this interview. It's about 55 minutes long, so let's watch it. And of course, I will be providing commentary as we go along.
Prince Reza Pahlavi, you're here in Germany for a conference, but let's start talking about what happened in the past weeks. Was there a day where you were hopeful that the regime could really fall?
It's always been, to me, a matter of when as opposed to if.
Sorry, I just want to say one thing before we begin. So this interview happened at the end of July. That is when we had our historic gathering in Munich. This was at the end of July, and over 500 Iranians, including myself, from around the world, we gathered basically to show our solidarity, right, for overthrowing the Islamic Republic, and of course for supporting His Royal Highness King Reza Pahlavi to lead the official opposition. Now, the only reason there were 500 people there is due to space limitations, but hundreds of thousands of Iranians actually wanted to attend but were unable to. But of course, the event was live streamed and it was viewed by hundreds of millions of Iranians in Iran and around the world. All right, let's begin.
Prince Reza Pahlavi, you're here in Germany for a conference, but let's start talking about what happened in the past weeks. Was there a day where you were hopeful that the regime could really fall?
It's always been, to me, a matter of when as opposed to if. And the simple reason for it is because if historically you look at totalitarian regimes, ultimately they succumb. We saw the end of the Soviet Union, and we've seen an end to many unwanted regimes, particularly when we have to face a regime that is purely ideologically, a regime that tried to export this ideology at the expense of its own people. And from the very beginning, Iranians were faced with so much discrimination that came along with it, so much repression that came along with it. And when you look historically, that this regime is a combination of the worst kind of regimes we ever had on the planet. Whether it was Hitler and his behavior, or the Soviet Union or South Africa, in any aspect of fascism or totalitarianism or racism, this regime embodies all of the worst examples in history that we have had of the.
It's so incredibly true, and not a lot of attention is given to the crimes against humanity that this Islamic Republic is responsible for. And every single thing that they accuse the late Shah of Iran of doing, it's something that they themselves have done. There's no documentary evidence or proof of the late Shah of Iran ever doing anything, right? But they themselves created these lies about the Shah, but yet they are the ones who have actually been doing that to Iranians for the last 47 years, right? No one ever talks about the fact that the Islamic Republic rapes Iranian women before executing them because, they view it, in their religious Islamic ideology, they believe that virgins go to heaven. So to make sure that Iranian women who are executed for the crimes of, blasphemy against Allah or whatever nonsense, before they hang them, they will rape the women. And, the Islamic clerics governing Iran say that this is allowed and it is halal to rape women before executing them because they want to make sure their souls don't go to heaven. That is how evil and barbaric and demonic the Islamic Republic truly is. And people don't know about this stuff. Like they don't understand. They just, because the things that the Islamic Republic does and has been doing to Iranians is so incredibly horrific that it's even difficult to comprehend how barbaric and savage these Islamists truly are.
Worst type of regime. So can you imagine the response that people of that country would have? And I think the world as well, when they look at it.
You were very vocal during the bombings, and you said people, should go out and stand against the regime. But we didn't see many people demonstrating on the streets. We didn't see a movement. Is that because the regime is still very strong and people are afraid? Or is there still a lot of support for the regime, what you don't see?
Well, I mean, during the military campaign when Iran was targeted, and people, in fact, they had to leave the city. You cannot imagine that under the circumstances you can have organized street demonstrations.
I mean, that's a very good point, right? Like when the IDF was attacking Islamic Republic military bases, during the 12-day conflict, the IDF was actually telling Iranians, where to evacuate from. And, basically they were saying like, stay inside, stay in, residential areas and, stay away from certain places. So, how do people expect, why did people expect Iranians to go out and demonstrate while the IDF is targeting Islamic regime military bases. Like it makes no sense, right? Like no rational actor is going to go out and do that. And so for people to unfairly put that on Iranians as if, just, you guys didn't go out, therefore that means you don't want regime change. I think that's a very, very idiotic argument to make, because no one in their right minds is going to want to go out. I mean, like, what do these people want to see? Iranians go out and be murdered, right? I mean, Iranians are rational actors here. They're not like these third world barbaric savages who go out and, yell Allahu Akbar whenever they see bombs being flown overhead, right? Like that's what Gazans do because they're, a very savage, jihadi, terrorist society. But Iranians are not like that. And that's why you did not see those sorts of images coming out of Iran, right?
Although a few weeks after now, as I speak to you, again, we see various diverse form of manifestations that Iranians keep on going. There's been, as of late, some demonstrations in the north of Iran for, again, water shortages. I remember the Caspian. This is one of the most water-related ample regions of our country. I mean, if you go to the north of Iran, you think you're in Thailand. So lush and so forest and water. And yet there are water shortages even in that province as we speak. People are faced daily with electricity ruptures. No gas has been delivered. They cannot even live, let alone work.
So this interview is from July 30th. The water shortage situation is now so bad that the Islamic Republic is at the point of even like now they're trying to claim that it's so bad that people need to evacuate the capital city of Tehran. Some people believe that the reason the Islamic Republic wants to get people to leave the capital city of Tehran is because they know that if people in Tehran rise up to overthrow the regime, the Islamic regime is done for. So there are certain people who are claiming that this water crisis, this water shortage, is being done deliberately in order to suppress the Iranian people and to prevent them from overthrowing the Islamic Republic. I wanted to point out there. Lionel, when he said Iran like Thailand, he was referring to the environment, right? So when you go to the northern part of Iran, it's very like subtropical, rainforest type, forests and a lot of water. So that's what he means. He's like environmentally, the northern part of Iran is similar to Thailand, but even there, the provinces are experiencing a water shortage because the Islamic Republic is deliberately keeping water from the Iranian people.
And this is something that keeps on going. Yes, the regime was severely emasculated, which is good because it equals the playing field for people. So the momentum is still there. And I'm sure you've been witness to it as a reporter, as a journalist, that there are always ebbs and flows when there are campaigns of that nature. But the momentum keeps going. And as I explained to you earlier, before we came on air, it's a multi-pronged campaign. It has various components and many wheels are in motion as I speak to you. And a lot of what we will discover is as a result of the regime's weakening. And now that the playing field has been more equal for the people, there will be more opportunities now to galvanize and orchestrate themselves. And the regime repressive apparatus has been severely weakened. Not that they will keep on repressing, they do. In fact, they're taking revenge on the people right now in some form or shape. But reason more for people to realize that this is an opportunity not to miss.
What do you hear from inside the regime? Do you have contacts? Do you have people telling you what's really happening?
Yes, and not only do we reach out, but now we've been reached too. That defection campaign that has begun when I announced it almost a month ago when I was in Paris during a press conference. We have received a lot of inquiries, and that data is right now being, as I speak to you, analyzed as exactly what ranks in the military or paramilitary or the civilian bureaucracy are reaching out. And I think
guys, that's really important. And, one of the reasons that you're not hearing a lot about these snowballing defections within the country is because whoever's responsible for that is keeping it under wraps for obvious reasons, right? But we have started to see signs of various factions who have defected, and people are now starting to post images on social media anonymously through anonymous accounts where, you know, they are in uniform, but, you know, their face is hidden, and any sort of like identifying anything that can identify them is hidden. But, you know, they're sending out messages saying that we have defected and we are ready. And we are seeing more and more evidence of that on social media. Of course, that's not being reported in the mainstream media. It's not being reported in the news. But there is this growing underground movement of people who are defecting to join the Iranian national uprising, which is, of course, being led by His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, Iran's Shah in exile. So that is, you know, a critical aspect to what is currently happening. And guys, like I've said this from the beginning, and I'll continue to say this. I truly believe that the way that the Islamic Republic is going to fall, it's not going to be from people just going out into the streets, okay? Because I cannot recall a single time in history where a totalitarian dictatorship was overthrown by people going to the streets. Why? Because the totalitarian dictatorship has access to the weapons, has access to the funding, has access to the military, right? The only way totalitarian dictatorships have been overthrown is through an internal military coup d'etat, which was then supported by the people. So, you know, quote me on this, bookmark this, save this, but I'm telling you guys, the way that I see the Islamic Republic being overthrown is through an internal military coup d'etat. And then once the military gains control of, you know, government bases and basically takes control of the country, that's when the military is going to signal to the Iranian people, you know, we've you know, successfully had a military coup d'etat. It is now safe to come into the streets and help us overthrow the Islamic Republic. So that's how I see this playing out.
The reason this is important is because outside of what people are doing in terms of organizing themselves in demonstrations, but a big part of my strategy post-regime and transition is what fills the gap once this regime is no longer there. And most of these elements that can then be those who fill the gap are important in that equation, and we are talking to them and reaching out to them and see what we can do together.
How do people from inside the regime defect? I mean, how does that work?
Well, the first mechanism is to provide them with a secure way of communicating, because we need to protect their identity for obvious reasons. So that's a delicate matter. So we're trying to do it very cautiously and taking all the security precautions necessary.
But how does it work? Do they call a number on?
There's a safe platform through which they can contact and identify themselves, and the way we can communicate with them.
So that safe platform was through a QR code, right? So let me see if I can find something about it, because it was advertised. Here, what was it like? Wait, let me go to my search here. So it was basically okay. It was a QR code. All right, the posts are only in Farsi, but anyway, so what happened is during the summer, he basically had a message in Farsi, and then in Farsi, right, he was saying to people inside of Iran, you know, there is an opportunity for you to defect and to join us. You will see a QR code that is going to be scanned on Iran International TV. Do not trust any other link. Do not trust any other source. Do not trust any other QR code. Do not trust any, you know, so-called like screenshotted images or photos of it. The only safe and secure place to scan the QR code is when you see it being broadcast live on Iran International TV. And so that's exactly what happened. And that was a very important campaign, and that campaign is, you know, continuing.
And as a result, once we engage with them, then the next step is what exactly can they be doing in their respective position when it is time for them to actually surface and openly manifest themselves. I mean, clearly, when you're dealing with this kind of regime, you're trying to protect your assets within the country as much as possible because you don't want them to prematurely expose themselves. So it's a matter of timing that also comes into play. Having said that, you have, of course, a visible part of the opposition, but you also have an invisible part of the structure that have to remain protected in their identity so that at the right time they can do whatever they're supposed to do.
So the situation inside Iran with the regime, how is it developing right now?
We sense a lot of demoralized forces. The supreme leader himself has been hiding in his bunker. Our sources tell
he still is, by the way. So the supreme dictator of the Islamic Republic, Ali Khamenei, to this day is still hiding in a bunker, and he only comes out like very, very rarely, for like half an hour or something to give some, Islamist jihadi speech, and then he goes back into his bunker. Like, the supreme dictator is not having a good time right now.
Tell us that he's been heavily medicated. He's in a very bad shape, psychologically very depressed, and is receiving special treatment for that apart from his normal ailments. So these things are not looking good for the top echelon of the leadership. It's really crumbling around him. There are internal rivalries already starting in terms of accusing one another or posturing versus one another. It has become quite fragile and at the same time weakened. So whatever it is that are right now calculating, I think part of it is whether or not they want to still maintain that element of pressure by intimidating people or threatening people, or once again trying to cut them off from the rest of the world in terms of communication, things like that. But the elements within the system now is surpassing it. The economic crisis in Iran continues to be going on. As I said, within the summer months, extreme heat and temperature, there's no gas, there's no electricity, there's no water. And that situation by itself makes it much more unstable, and the regime has no answer for those questions. So that at the same time, dealing with that external pressure, they have to deal with all these problems. I think right now they're just overloaded with problems, and that's why we think that this is a moment where they won't be able to do anything any more harmful to the country in the sense of opportunities for people to rise.
Do you know where Khamenei exactly is? His location in a bunker? Do you think he's in a bunker since weeks, months?
It's been reported that in a couple of times he was moved to a different location. We don't know exactly the specifics, but he finally came out a little while ago to manifest himself, because a lot of people, even within his own group, would say, "What the hell is he doing? Well, where is he?" They were looking out for him, and that was interpreted as a sign of almost like giving up. So they're playing the psychological game as always.
Do you think there was a plan from Israel to kill him? Because it was reported that there was the possibility for the Israeli military to kill him, and that Trump told Israel to back off.
That seems to be the case, yes. And I think that took a little bit of the momentum out.
One of the biggest mistakes Trump made is when he told Israel to back off 100%. That was rough. That was rough. I don't know what Trump was thinking. I think that's where maybe the isolationists got to him. But, as you can see, since then, the Islamic Republic has not backed down. In fact, they are continuing to engage in terrorist activity against the United States. They're continuing to fund their Islamic terror proxy groups in the Middle East. I don't know if President Trump thought he could negotiate with terrorists, but, the one thing that myself and many other Iranians have said, you cannot negotiate with terrorists. You cannot negotiate with the Islamic Republic. One of the core foundational pillars of the Islamic Republic is its jihad against the West. The Islamic Republic literally rode the waves to power on the anti-imperialist narrative that was promoted by the Islamists and the communists and the woke progressives back in the 1970s, right? And again, if you go and watch my documentaries, you know, what I've, my live stream documentaries here, I will, let me give you an example here, right? So if you want to learn more about the history of the Islamic Revolution, I suggest you check out, gosh, where is it? I suggest you check out this one here. So let me just pull this up for you guys so you can see. Okay. Because I know a lot of you guys, you know, in my daily live streams, you asked me about the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And, you know, a lot of you have questions in the comments, but guys, like, we go over in detail what happened leading up to the 1979 Islamic Revolution several times. Okay. So what you want to do is on my channel, you know, you scroll down to where it says Iranians rate documentaries about Iran. And I have a whole bunch here, but you know, the one that you want to check out, if there's only one that you watch, you definitely want to watch this one here. Okay, so it's the first one. It's the one that I've rated it a 3 out of 10. That is a 4-hour live stream. Okay, so you know, you want to know more about 1979. You want to understand what led up to that. You want to understand the lies involved, the taqiyya involved, you know, the all the propaganda from the communists and the socialists. You know, that's the one that you want to watch. That will explain everything to you. But you know, to summarize it, the 1979 Islamic Revolution was based on fake news that was put out by the communists and the Islamists based on their anti-imperialist narrative, right? So in order to understand how the Islamic Republic operates and thinks today, you have to understand the history of the 1979 Islamic Revolution and what led to it, right? This isn't something that happened overnight. That was something that took 40 years, okay? So again, 1979 did not happen overnight. It started in 1941 and they slowly built up. There was also a lot of funding from the Soviets at the time, right? So again, we talk about this unholy alliance of the red and the black. That's where Soviet funding comes in through the Tudeh party and through the Marxist Islamist groups, and of course Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians, right? They were also a part of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. So, you know, in order to understand why you cannot negotiate with the Islamic Republic, you have to understand their motivation for coming into power. Their motivation was incredibly anti-imperialistic. And, you know, it was only after 1979 that you started hearing about this whole, you know, America, the Great Satan and death to America and all that stuff, because that did not exist prior to 1979. That is not an Iranian ideology. That is an Islamic jihadi ideology, right? Like the Islamic Republic thinks that way, not Iranians. So of course, necessarily, you cannot negotiate with people who literally chant death to America, and you know, their entire purpose is to destabilize your country and to turn it into, you know, part of their Islamic caliphate, basically. So that's where, you know, President Trump made a huge mistake in telling Israel to back off.
Because I think a lot of people thought that this could go, in fact, all the way. Now, retrospectively thinking, you know, you could say that perhaps once you take one person out, then the question becomes, well, who's the next person? As opposed to, well, he's still there, weakened, enraged, and easier to target in a system that everything depends on the supreme leader. So there are pros and cons as to whether he should be there or not be there. That's a separate calculation. My focus, on the other hand, is that irrespective of whether Khamenei is taken out or not, it doesn't change the nature of our struggle. It doesn't change the goal of our campaign. The dynamics of it and the necessity for that transition remains the same, irrespective of whether Ali Khamenei is alive or dead. And because, you know, this is the totality of the system once again, that is the problem. Not necessarily that if one individual is replaced by another, that would resolve the problem, either for the regime or change the nature of our campaign. So these are all the side, factors and variables, but it doesn't change in any form or shape the way we are conducting our campaign.
How do you see the strategy of the regime right now? I mean, they're trying to reach out to European partners. They've been talking to the German foreign ministry and to the German foreign ministry even. They're reaching out to contacts inside the US. So it looks like they want to talk again. How would you describe?
There's nothing new to that pattern of behavior. If you analyze the last 40 years, every time the regime has had its back to the wall, it has basically gone to their default strategy of buying time. And part of that.
And that's exactly what they're doing again right now. They are buying time, right? It's the same behavior, the same pattern over again, and it's literally the definition of insanity to repeat to have the same thing repeated and to expect different results, right? I mean, they've already demonstrated that they're only going to behave in a certain way, and that behavior is terrorism, right? Like there's nothing else. They haven't demonstrated anything else, and yet people, for some reason, still think that they can negotiate with these Islamic terrorists. That speaks to the strength of the Islamic regime lobby group, right? That speaks to the billions of dollars that they have invested in people around the world to act like spokespersons for them, right? And they're not necessarily all Iranian either. There's a vast majority of non-Iranians who are out there supporting the Islamic Republic occupying Iran. Mehdi Hassan, the infidel Islamist, jihadi guy, he's definitely one of them. Like the guy's Pakistani, right? He's like a Pakistani Islamist terrorist guy who's literally defending the Islamic Republic, right? It's not even his country, and yet he's out there supporting this brutal Islamist dictatorship, right? You do know why? Because of the money, because of the billions of dollars that the Islamic Republic is investing in people like Mehdi Hassan, like, Tucker Carlson and others, right? To get them to spout their Islamist jihadi narrative, to try to make it seem like these people are rational actors that can be negotiated with.
Strategy of buying time is trying to trick the world yet again, leading them to think that maybe this time we're really serious about negotiating with you. They've done that systematically. If you look at every time they've done that, which leads me to say that there's no reason for us to believe that this time they really mean to be honest about we're serious about negotiating a problem. I think this is yet again an indication that under pressure, they are letting some steam out and giving them a false hope that perhaps this time we have an opportunity to settle the problem with them, only in the interest of buying time.
And why is the West buying that, you think?
Again, because I think there is this sort of status quo-ish mentality that has been prevailing in Western diplomacy in general, which is all based on the initial premise of an expectation of behavior change that has lasted for the past 40 years. If you look at it, every aspect of the foreign policy of the West in general, by the West I mean the United States and its European allies, vis-a-vis this regime, from the very beginning, and from the first time that sanctions were imposed on the regime. It was not based on expecting a change of regime in Iran or even pursuing that as an alternative, but rather let's expect a change of behavior by this regime. And that's why it has never worked, because the whole premise is wrong to begin with. This regime simply cannot change its behavior. It cannot reform itself. It cannot adhere to the same values and principles and rationale that the Western free world expects a government to behave like, particularly that this regime doesn't give a hoot about the Iranian people. It's not there for the benefit of its country. It's just using our national resources, our peoples, as a human shield to basically foment their strategy of exporting their ideology from day one. For the past 40 years, that's what the regime has done. And the world needs to recognize now that the ultimate solution to the problem is not attempting yet again to throw a lifeline to this regime and try to negotiate a deal with them, as opposed to the ultimate solution is for this regime to be no longer there. Not only it liberates one nation, but it also it resolves most of the problems you have with this regime, whether it's the nuclear threat, radicalism, terrorism, funding of various elements, all the way to European soil and even beyond in the Western Hemisphere. That's what the regime has proven to do systematically. So I think if you fall yet again for the regime's tactic of buying more time and delaying the problem, the rest of the problems will not dissipate. It will continue to remain.
Let's talk about the nuclear.
I also want to point something out, this is what the Islamic Republic is like. Okay. So anyone who thinks that these people are rational actors, and you can, negotiate with them, they literally spend money to, look at this. They literally spend government money to put up these ridiculous looking billboards, right? Where it's President Trump is bowing to Khamenei, right? Do you see how idiotic and just, stupid this Islamic Republic is, right? This is a kind of propaganda. Iranian people don't have clean drinking water, don't have electricity, suffering from extreme poverty because, these evil, demonic Islamic ayatollahs are stealing the, money that should be going to the Iranian people. Not only are they lining their own pockets, not only are they, spending it on, Hamas terrorists in, Gaza and, Hezbollah and all these people, they're literally also printing, billboards like this, right? What rational or logical government does something like this? I mean, I was a politician for 7 years in Canada, okay? I was in politics for 10 years. I was an elected official for 7 years. No rational, logical government would ever approve of something like this, right? You literally have to be an insane 7th century barbaric savage to think that using government resources to print out posters like this is rational or logical behavior, right? So when we Iranians say the Islamic Republic is evil and they are irrational 7th century Islamic savages, this is what we're talking about, because no rational government will ever use government money to print out posters like this, right? So stop legitimizing the Islamic Republic, stop negotiating with them, stop pretending like they are rational actors, stop pretending like these people are your allies or that they are not your enemies. These people are evil and demonic, and it is unfortunate that there are people like Tucker Carlson who have very, very large platforms who keep on trying to legitimize the Islamic Republic as if it's some sort of normal, rational, misunderstood. No, there's nothing misunderstood about them. When the Islamic Republic yells death to America, they literally mean death to America. It is their policy to destabilize the United States and take over the exact same way that they destabilized and took over Iran in 1979, right? Again, remember, I'm Iranian. My country is being occupied by the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic is the one who not only murders Iranians, right? The Islamic Republic is responsible for the murder of almost 3 million Iranians in the last 47 years, okay? So they have murdered 3 million of us. No one ever speaks about that, right? But now it's not enough for them to murder Iranians and turn Iran into a 7th century Islamic hellhole. They are now coming after your countries too, and you guys have to be prepared for this. You might not want war with them, but they have already brought the war to you. They are, infiltrating your societies, and they are paying people like Tucker Carlson and Mehdi Hassan and others to legitimize them and to confuse you into making think that your own government is the enemy when meanwhile, it's actually the Islamic Republic that's your enemy. But you will never see those people show images like this, right? You will never see them call out the pure insanity of the Islamic Republic.
That's the reason why the US bombed the facilities. What do you know about the situation on the ground? How much is it damaged? There's different analysis on that.
The way I will describe it is that is being severely curtailed, but it hasn't disappeared for two reasons. Number one, yes, some of the nuclear sites were heavily damaged, but that doesn't stop the regime's resolve to continue enrichment. In fact, they declared it. They said, we're not only going to stop it, they practically have doubled down on it. So much for an expectation of full capitulation that was Donald Trump's expectation, that there's absolutely no way possible that we would even allow that. It doesn't seem that the regime has got a message despite the fact that they were attacked. So that's going on. Number two, there's no guarantee that this regime could not acquire nuclear weapons, even if it means by acquisition from some of the partners they have in that struggle. So it's not a matter of them, their personal capabilities of either enrich or be able to deploy their missile technology. So that doesn't make the problem disappear. Because as long as they have the resources, they can certainly acquire it in a different way. The problem, as I said, is a finger on the trigger at the end of the day. It's the regime itself that cannot be trusted, regardless of what signature they put on any document or any contract. And this is probably the root cause why you even have an anticipation of snapback, because it was geared on the premise that can we really trust them at the end of the day? Why would there have been a clause for a snapback if you thought that this regime could this time solve the problem and, everything goes back to normal? There's a reason for that. And I think part of it is based on the fact that even though they recognize that the verification process has to happen, and how many times has the regime been dubious about being transparent about things? Even the IAEA people could tell you that. This all ties to the whole nuclear fiasco that exists right now.
And there were different reports that they were able actually to bring the uranium somewhere else before the attack happened. And there was reports that they're not as damaged as Trump hoped. And
yes, and I would concur with that analysis. That it's not been accounted for where it is. I mean, this is just bits and pieces of the entire problem. I mean, if you want to really dwell into it, there are many other reasons to believe that this problem has not evaporated overnight, regardless of the consequences of the Israelis.
Is it possible to destroy it all from your point of view?
But if the whole premise is based on can we completely eliminate the problem of the nuclear threat emanating from this regime while it is still there, the only thing I can say is that this regime still being there means a continuation of the problem. And you cannot base your policy on the degree of weakness of a regime as opposed to the inherent threat built into the nature of the regime. And as long as we don't realize that, it's a false imagination on an artificially created environment that, well, we cannot justify our diplomacy because we can now prove to the world there's no longer a nuclear threat coming from Iran because such and such installation was hit. That's not the case as far as I'm concerned.
Talking about regime change, there was back in June lots of discussions about it, even from the Israeli side. When I was there reporting from there, there was the Minister of Defense actually saying that, there should be a regime change. Then the president said, no, this is not our goal. Then Prime Minister Netanyahu back down, and same in the US. There's some people from the Congress saying we need a regime change, but at the same time Trump said, no way, we don't want regime change. We remember what happened in Iraq, so there's nothing we want to do.
That's one of the biggest mistakes. So guys, pay attention to this part, because a lot of people are like, oh, we don't want another Iraq, we don't want another Afghanistan. It is very lazy. It is a lazy argument to assume that Iran is anything like Iraq or anything like Afghanistan. Iran is a completely different culture, completely different society, completely different set of value systems. And so to imply that Iran is going to turn into some failed state, guys, the country right now is a failed state. Okay, there is literally nothing, absolutely nothing that can make the country worse, first and foremost. And second of all, unlike those other countries, we don't have tribalism. There is no tribalism within the country, right? Like, we're all Iranian first and foremost. And so that is one of the big key distinctions. And of course, Iran is one of the oldest countries in the world. So where you have countries like, Iraq and Afghanistan who were carved out, Iran has been around for over 3,000 years. as just as the concept of a nation state, Iran has been around for like 3,000 years, and people don't realize that, right? Iran isn't some country that was carved out of the British Mandate after World War I, or after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Iran has always been there. That's the difference between Iran and those other countries that people try to compare Iran to.
So it looks like this will not happen from abroad. There will be no push on that, and we see what's happening in the past weeks. They all push for negotiations.
Okay, on that there's a lot to say. So let me first start by the fact that I think there's no other country on this planet that recognizes more why it is that this regime is a menace, and why is it that the people of Iran are a friend. The recognition between a regime that hates America, hates the Jewish state and the Jews, as opposed to a nation that once liberated, will prove that they could be the best friends of Israel and the United States. Point number one. Point number two is the fact that, yes, we have seen recent cases of regime change very poorly managed. Example, the Ba'athification after the fall of Saddam Hussein. Very poorly administered. And that gave regime change a bad name. Not that it's a bad concept. It's still the right thing to do, but it was so badly implemented.
Well, but it never worked.
And so when it comes to Iran, number one, Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not a country where we say, oh, we expect America to send its soldiers, so it's the boots on the ground from the American perspective. Of a U.S. taxpayer, I happen to be one of them, by the way. I don't want my money to be spent on endless campaigns of military presence abroad and so on and so forth. Our boots on the ground are the people of Iran. And the resources needed to fund it doesn't have to be a US or British or German taxpayer. It is actually, a lot of it could be frozen assets that belongs to the Iranian people in the first place that could be repurposed to fund many of these campaigns.
But we don't see any big uprising if you say that the people of Iran...
Because every time there was one, the world basically threw them under the bus. Look,
I mean,
it's not
2022.
the first time. During the Green Movement, the Massa Revolution. And every time when you look at it from the perspective of the Iranian people, they're reaching out to the free world. They say, where are you on this? Why aren't you on our side? And
But what do you mean with being on their side? So on the one hand, you say you don't want boots on the ground. So what is...
I'm trying to explain it to you. Again, I have never asked any foreign government to declare as their foreign policy that it is regime change. Let me be clear on that. Whether it's the US government or any European government, or for that matter, any other government.
See, this is an important distinction, right? So no Iranian, right? Not even the leader of the Iranian national uprising, His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, is demanding that foreign countries implement a formal policy of regime change. No one is saying that. And that's because ultimately, regime change has to come from within. So regime change has to come from Iranians themselves, right? So it is no other country's business, right, to say that whether or not they want it. Now, having said that, what is important is that countries also respect the Iranian people's right to self-determination. And if Iranians, which is actually the case, since Iranians want to overthrow the Islamic Republic, since Iranians themselves want regime change, what we are asking for, and I have a feeling that's what he's going to get into here, what we are asking for is for governments to stop enabling the Islamic Republic, stop legitimizing the Islamic Republic, allow the Iranian people to overthrow the Islamic Republic and determine for themselves what sort of democracy they want to have in the future, whether it's going to be a republic or whether it's going to be a constitutional monarchy, which will be determined by a referendum. And guys, we actually do have a plan for the day after the Islamic Republic is overthrown. I will get into that in future episodes, but today we're just focusing on this. But this is sort of a primer to build up to my episodes, which are going to talk about what regime change in Iran will look like and what the world can expect from Iran and from Iranians the day after the Islamic Republic is overthrown. So I want to make that very clear. There's also something I just wanted to share with you really quickly. when His Royal Highness indicated that America recognizes, right, that there is this difference between Iranians and the Islamic Republic. It's 100% true, and in fact, Marco Rubio himself made that statement earlier this past year. Just listen to this, guys.
So Iran today, 2 points I want to make about Iran, and it's really important. When we talk about Iran, I'm talking about the radical Shia clerics and not the people. The people of Iran are people of an ancient civilization, an ancient culture with tremendous pride and advances. And I don't know who take great pride in their Persian heritage and identity. And I don't know of any nation on earth in which there is a bigger difference between the people and those who govern them than what exists in Iran. And that's a fact that needs to be made repeatedly. In no way is the clerics who run that country representative of the people of that country and of its history and of contributions it's made to humanity. And it's a point I wish we would continue to make.
Right? So you guys have to remember, just because the Islamic Republic has been occupying Iran for 47 years, it does not erase over 2,500 years of Iranian identity, heritage, and culture, right? And of course, thankfully, there are American politicians like Marco Rubio who understand the difference between Iran and the Islamic Republic, right? And who understand that Iranians are trying to overthrow the Islamic Republic. But anyways, let's get back into this documentary, this interview with His Royal Highness King Reza Pahlavi, the exiled Shah of Iran.
Them to do is to show solidarity with the aspiration.
Let me go back a little bit here.
Explain it to you. I'm trying to explain it to you.
Okay.
Again, I have never asked any foreign government to declare as their foreign policy that it is regime change. Let me be clear on that.
That's
whether it's the
important.
US government or any European government, or for that matter, any other government.
That's really important because a lot of the Islamic Republic talking mouths in North America or elsewhere, they keep on they try to twist the narrative, and they try to say things like, America shouldn't be involved in regime change, right? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to imply that the only way that Iranians can overthrow the Islamic Republic is through foreign intervention. So when they use that sort of language, when they use that sort of narrative, they are fooling people into thinking that we want American interventionism, right? We have never once asked for American interventionism. But this is how the Islamic Republic and their Islamist supporters manipulate language to create a false narrative. So again, they will say something like, we do not want America involved in regime change. Well, no one's asking for America to be involved in regime change. We never have. We never will. We're not asking for American boots on the ground. We're not asking for American money. We're not even asking for American involvement, right? But the reason a lot of people who aren't familiar with Iran and Iranians think that the only way regime change can happen is through American interventionism is because that is the narrative that the Islamic Republic puts out. It's part of their very sophisticated, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda machine that they put out there in order to allow them to remain in power, right? It's an Islamic dictatorship. Their entire premise is based off of lies and taqiyya. And so they put out these narratives and they pay people to repeat these false narratives, right? It's the same reason why people think the Shah was a dictator, even though he wasn't. It's part of this well-sophisticated, well-funded propaganda machine, right? But when you actually peel back the layers and you look at the facts, you see that what they're saying doesn't hold up, right? The truth is something completely different.
Explain it to you. I'm trying to explain it to you. Again, I have never asked any foreign government to declare as their foreign policy that it is regime change. Let me be clear on that. Whether it's the US government or any European government, or for that matter, any other government. What I ask them to do is to show solidarity with the aspiration of a nation that wants the very same value systems that you as a German, or Donald Trump as an American, or President Macron as a French, or the British Prime Minister's citizen enjoy the freedoms, the democratic values,
Well, I would say
liberties that they have for our own country.
well, I would say in
So it's
2022,
solidarity with that.
in 2022, I saw a lot of solidarity from politicians, but also from normal German people. So the solidarity doesn't bring a revolution,
But
or
it starts
a
with
regime
that.
change.
It starts with that. Look, wasn't there a regime change in South Africa? Wasn't there a regime change in the Soviet Union? Wasn't there a regime change in Poland and many of the former Eastern Bloc countries once liberated from the yoke of communist totalitarianism? Those were all regime changes. And guess what? The free world did support it. They did support Nelson Mandela. They did support Lech Walesa. They did support many of these causes that liberated those countries. So if regime change is bad, then we should say an end of apartheid was wrong, an end of totalitarian communism was wrong, and in that case, ending a regime in Iran that has kept our countries hostages and has menaced the world with its terrorism and radicalism, that should be wrong. Is that our conclusion?
But what I would argue is that, and I mean, you mentioned it earlier, that it has to start from inside.
Of course, it's still the same thing.
And I would argue that the regime is still so strong that people from inside the regime are afraid of, going against Khamenei or other people, because they don't know what would happen after it, and they would be afraid that their own they'll be targeted from your side or other side.
I'm glad you're framing it this way, because it's exactly what people like myself and the rest of the democratic forces working together on this project are trying to explain to the world, and of course to our own nation, that unlike the element that would have created or has created a void post a regime collapse. Again, I point back to the example of Iraq.
Yeah, Major, I agree with you. Like this interviewer is incredibly hostile. But again, I mean, this is what we have to deal with constantly are these like people who are incredibly hostile, right? They're not hostile when it comes to the Islamic Republic. They're not hostile when it comes to brutal dictators who have been murdering Iranians for the last 47 years in the name of Allah and Muhammad and Islam, right? They're not hostile to them, but they're hostile to the leader of the Iranian opposition, who is literally saying, I'm fighting for a free, secular, democratic Iran, and I'm fighting for an Iran where the Iranian people themselves can determine what sort of free, secular, democratic system of government they want to have through a referendum, right? It's wild, the hostility here. It reminds me a lot of the hostility shown to the late Shah of Iran, Shahanshah Aryamer, in the mid to late 70s, when, the Islamists and communists were putting out all that, false propaganda about him. And then they were just incredibly hostile with him. And he was just sitting there like, where is this coming from? Right? Like, I don't understand why these people are once again taking the side of the communists and the Islamists and the leftists, right? It's always like this, and it's incredibly frustrating.
That we have a plan to tell our fellow compatriots and the entire world that post-regime collapse is not going to be chaos, it's not going to be an unknown, that we can point to the direction of exactly how this transition can happen. How can that void be populated? So you don't have to be concerned about the aftermath of this regime collapse. And a lot of that depends, of course, in our success in our campaign to recruit those elements that can now be on the people's side as opposed to on the regime side. And the people see that and they do recognize that.
But you're talking about a possible collapse of the regime. Where do you see that? Why would the regime collapse? Because they're there since 47 years now.
Okay.
And
why would the regime collapse? Because it is completely corrupt. They can't pay their own people. And they're basically giving all the money to terrorist groups around the world. Like it's like he's asking the question. It's like he's saying, why would Nazi Germany collapse? I don't know, because it was hated.
Okay.
I mean, you would think as a German, he would have a little bit more understanding, given the fact that almost 100 years ago, his country was also, occupied by Nazis. And the only reason that he is not able to live in a free, secular, democratic country is because of the Allied forces, right? The Allied forces freed Germany from Hitler and the Nazi occupation. And yet, for some reason, it seems like he's forgotten all about that.
Who benefits from this regime being in place in Iran? If you look at elements within the country that actually benefits from this regime being in power, and most of it is for monetary reasons, because they actually have a monetary interest to preserve the system to their own interest. It's the top echelon of this corrupt paramilitary mafia that governs the nation at the expense of a nation that is oil rich, that is gas rich, and yet 60% of our society lives under the poverty line. Where is the money concentrated in? In the hands of the few and not the many. So you're talking about a very narrow strata that is part of the regime's root support that benefits from this regime being in place. But if you look at the bulk of the cadres of whether it's the civilian bureaucracy or whether it is the military and paramilitary forces, they don't have any interest in this system. And the ideological beliefs, if they once had it, is completely eradicated. And that's why if you are a member of the military, if you're a member of the IRGC, and you see that this regime is on the verge of collapse, that the people are literally at the spot of explosion, you ask yourself, why should I endure anymore? That humility and face the music one time, the people will rise, will be their first target, and the long top echelon will be long gone and take flight and go seek refuge wherever it is.
But at the end, you need people in front of a bunker or a palace, you need demonstration, you need uprising. That's how regimes everywhere in the world fell.
And
that's not true. So again, he's like, so he's necessarily assuming that the only way that regimes can be overthrown is through people going out in the streets and uprising. I really wish that here, His Royal Highness had responded and said, well, how was Germany freed from the Nazis? Was it because the Germans went out and rose up? Or was it because Germany was freed when the Allied forces came in, right? So for him to say that, the only way that dictatorships are overthrown is by people going on the street is completely ignorant. It's 100% false. And, we've already seen what happens with totalitarian dictatorships, right? When people in totalitarian dictatorships go out, the only thing that happens is they get murdered. No totalitarian dictatorships have been overthrown by people just going out in the streets and rising up. It doesn't happen. Totalitarian dictatorships are overthrown through military coups d'etats or foreign interventions. And what we're trying to do, or what His Royal Highness is focusing on in Iran, is that campaign of mass defections and a military coup d'etat. So this guy is completely ignorant. He's either ignorant, idiotic, a bad actor, or possibly all of the above. Because again, for him to say that the only way dictatorships can be overthrown is by people going out of the streets, that's not exactly what happened with Germany and the Nazi occupation.
Then when it comes to world solidarity, somebody like myself is trying to come here to explain to governments, look, this is what could happen. We've been muzzled, we've been cut off, because the excuse of the foreign ministries of these countries that, we have to manage the problem. We have hostages over there. If we put more pressure, they're going to blackmail us yet again. We cannot do this. We cannot do that. We cannot engage in.
Did you catch that part about the hostages? So hostage taking has always been one of the key elements of Islamic terrorists and Islamic dictatorships, right? So yes, there are currently hostages being held by the Islamic Republic. No one really talks about that, right? No one talks about that. And yet there are governments who are still trying to normalize the Islamic Republic and who think that they can negotiate with a brutal Islamic dictatorship that literally holds people hostage to use as negotiation pawns, right? What does it sound like? What does that remind you guys of? Of course, Hamas, because Hamas is the baby brother of the Islamic Republic, and all of these terrorist groups in the Middle East get their marching orders and learn from the Islamic Republic, which has been, which is basically the head of the snake when it comes to Islamic terrorism in the Middle East and around the world.
dialogue. So basically, once again, those freedom fighters and those of us fighting for freedom are being sacrificed for the sake of political expediency. So the nature of the foreign politics also has a direct bearing on how we can be sooner successful than not. Not that I'm saying that Iranians' liberation depends on the good will of this or that country. I've always said it, even to my own compatriots, that we can only rely on ourselves, but it would be so much easier for us if we had the world on our side.
How long will it take?
It could happen very fast. It could happen very, very fast because...
But nothing looks like it would happen fast.
Well, look...
based on what? Like, again, the guy's completely uninformed. So, guys, I actually do believe it would happen very fast. I have a feeling that when the Islamic Republic is overthrown by a military coup, it's going to be like the Berlin Wall. Like, it's going to be just incredibly fast, incredibly quick. Right? Like, that's how I see this happening. And I feel like this German guy is just either completely misinformed or he's a bad actor, because he is just, he's stupid. I'm sorry to say it. Like, the guy is stupid.
Orchestrating such a campaign demands that many wheels comes into motion, as I explained to you earlier. And right now, when the regime has been severely weakened, we are now assessing what are the new opportunities that we haven't had until about 2 months ago. Which are the regime's severe fragmentation. That the targets, if you look at the campaign, was not just targeting Iranian nuclear site. It actually targeted many instances that the regime utilizes for surveillance and as an instrument of repression against its own citizenry. The top commanders have been taken out. This is a very hard thing for a regime to replace overnight.
There's new commanders coming, and there's new commanders now, and the regime is striking back. People from inside.
It's never the same. You cannot repopulate so suddenly when there's so en masse being decimated. Now, it's almost like, if I were here to tell you about the anatomy of how a repressive regime manages to survive, you have to get into their mindset and their strategy. What I'm talking about is what can we take advantage of? When I say we, I mean the opportunity for the people to rise based on A, the regime's weakness. Number two, the fact that the world may in fact bring even more pressure on the regime. We are exploring right now by the end of this month coming, if the regime doesn't suddenly and very radically change its attitude and posture, we can contemplate snapback being reinstated again. These are all elements that makes life more difficult for the regime, and directly and consequentially easier for the people for opportunities.
But at the same time, what we hear from Iran is that the regime is striking back, that it's more aggressive than ever. I mean, we heard about executions.
Of course they do. They do retaliate against the people because they're still playing the same waiting game. They're trying to buy time vis-a-vis the outside world. So in the meantime, they can re-engage in a politics of fear against the people by saying, despite what you think, we're still capable of hitting you. But this is sheer madness revenge. They're arresting
Major, he is absolutely a bad actor. So Major's referring to the journalist, because no one is this clueless. I do this idiot's job and it isn't difficult. He knows exactly what he is saying and is deliberately trying to trap His Imperial Highness. I agree. This journalist, he's a bad actor. Again, like this reminds me of those reporters in the 70s who were trying the same tactics with Shahanshah Aryamer, the late Shah of Iran at the time, the father of the current Shah in exile. And they would just ask these ridiculous questions, and they would almost try to, like what he's trying to do right now is like he's trying to blame the Reza Pahlavi, the Shah in exile. It's like he's trying to blame him for the crimes of the Islamic Republic, right? Like it's very, very frustrating to see. But again, this is the uphill battle that we Iranians have constantly had for the last 47 years. Like this is just, I mean, if this is what you do, then I mean, I'll take your word on this then. He's a bad actor. Like, that's what I'm getting here from this journalist guy.
This is left and right under the guise that these are Israeli spies or
But-
Mossad agents or what
But
have
this
you.
is
And
how it
they're doing
worked
as we speak.
in many countries. I mean,
Yes.
not that I can compare dictatorships or authoritarian regimes with each other, but if we see
But-
what happened in Russia, for example, or
So aren't you then a little bit surprised if you were an Iranian that somebody like Donald Trump, that on the one hand supports the Israeli campaign of striking Iran, all of a sudden says, now stop it, these are good guys, we can come to terms with them. Demonstrating that many leaders in the world think that simply because you have, in their own mind, eliminated one element who was a bone of contention, things can go back to business as usual, and problem is resolved. Again, it shows to me that understanding the nature of this regime and its continuance, how much consequences this could have, reinforces my argument of why, at the end of the day, this regime has to go. Now, again, let me repeat, I'm not expecting Donald Trump or the German chancellor or anybody else for that matter to declare that our foreign policy is based on declaring regime change in Iran. That's not what I'm asking for.
I mean, that's really important because everyone keeps on stressing, we don't want our governments to be involved in regime change. No one has ever asked for any foreign government to declare a policy of regime change in Iran. We've never asked for it. I've never talked about it. His Royal Highness has never mentioned it. No Iranian has. It's just part of the propaganda and the disinformation that the supporters of the Islamic Republic put out there to try and confuse non-Iranians about what it is that we are actually asking for, what it is that we actually want. Amir, Goldie, although I agree with everyone, you look amazing. Oh, thank you. Okay. I'm impressed much more deeply from your work, your bravery, your loyalty for the truth and the peaceful way. Javid Shah, may Iran be free ASAP. Thank you, Amir. That is so kind of you to say. I really appreciate that. That's what we are absolutely fighting for. And always great to have you with us. And, thank you for being a moderator on this channel. Always love hearing from you and your input in the chat. Thank you.
What I do ask for, however, is for your chancellor, the American president, his allies, and our regional partners who recognize that at the end of the day, once this regime is gone, not one, but many problems associated with it would also disappear, can take opportunity of a window, which is right now in front of us. But the regime in 46 years has never been as weak as it is, and the nation has never been as ready as it is today. And there are additional components that are added to this that we haven't had until recent years. Two factors. One is that many former reformists who still believed that by some ways we can bring change from within have given up on that idea. That narrative is now finished, despite what some of the talking heads of the regime are trying to lead you to believe. That is gone. And number two, I think that I don't have an immediate concrete answer for you, but based on the data that they will analyze of all these new defectors, how much more can we count on these elements now being a positive additional element in our campaign that is taking away from the regime to the benefit of the nation? So it's always a direct rapport de force, as the French will say, between the regime's capabilities and the opposition abilities. And we are witnessing that as we speak. We are gearing up towards that momentum. And eventually, what you say we need to see, you as a journalist watching from the outside, or any expectation that the world has, is that movement finally going to be more manifest in Iran? I guarantee you it will. And in fact, there are some elements of it. Is it at the level of full combination? We're building towards that. And what we hope is that in the meantime, as we're gearing up for that, the world doesn't yet again throw this regime another lifeline, because this will simply delay our ability to liberate ourselves. And meanwhile, the other problems emanated with the regime. So, diplomacy or not, they need to recognize, and that's what I would like to draw a parallel to the end of the Cold War and the Soviet Union. They have to have a strategy for what if the regime was to collapse.
But
none of these countries have that strategy as I speak to
I still haven't understood what exactly Donald Trump or Friedrich Merz and others should do from your perspective, because you're saying no regime change. They don't have to mention it. It's not important if they mention it. You say no boots on the ground. You say solidarity, but this is very vague. I mean,
this journalist is an idiot. He's an idiot. Like, I don't know how much more clearly it can be spelled out, but okay, so now we're trying for, number 3, the third time that His Royal Highness is going to try and explain to this very idiotic and obtuse journalist about what it is that Iranians who are fighting to overthrow the Islamic Republic want from the world. Let's see if he will finally catch on after the third time.
Solidarity doesn't make a revolution.
Let me give you the specifics. Maximum pressure. What was maximum pressure? Maximum pressure was more sanctions on the regime. One of them, the most biggest elephant in the room, is subscribing the IRGC. The G6 have yet to do that, despite the fact that the EU Parliament and many other legislators have actually said that we should prescribe the IRGC.
So what he's referring to is putting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on the terrorist list, right? So that's something that we've achieved in Canada. We worked for 7 years lobbying the government until finally the government agreed to put the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on the Canadian terror list. The IRGC is sanctioned by the United States as well. It's on the US terror list. Most recently, it was put on the Australian terror list as well. However, it has yet to happen in large scale in Europe, for example. So when he's referring to prescribing the IRGC, that's what he's referring to. That is something tangible that governments can do, which does not include, does not involve boots on the ground, does not involve any element of, taxpayer money, nothing like that. But if you put the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on your terror lists, that is a huge help, because that, will cut off all of their, financial assets and, their ability to use international banks and everything like that, right? Like, that is one tangible step that governments can take, but have not done yet. European governments, anyway.
The excuse that we hear, because I talked about it and asked some of former politicians, why is it that you're not prescribing the IRGC as a terrorist organization, which gives you much more forensic depth of actually identifying their networks and their footprints, whether it's operating in Europe or elsewhere. And it goes back again to this whole hostage issue, or we don't want to lose our diplomatic access to the regime because we have a chancery there, and so on and so forth. To me, I think these are lame excuses. It's just not facing up to the reality that the leverage you can have against the regime, you're caving in under a policy of blackmail by the regime of taking your hostages, and that makes you hesitant about doing something that is the most obvious element that could severely curtail the regime, which is one of them is prescribing the IRGC as part of your maximum pressure campaign. Now, maximum pressure from the outside is one thing. What about maximum support? There are many things that the free world can do to help the Iranian people in their cause. For instance, we have seen time and again that one of the most critical aspects for the Iranian people is not to be disconnected from the world and the ability to communicate with one another. We talked about the importance of having access to the internet. We talked about Starlink being in Iran. As a matter of fact, by the way, side note, if you own a Starlink platform right now, you're subject to arrest and it's a crime. It's no longer a problem. I mean, that's how the regime retaliates. They know how important.
Yeah, like that's the other thing. People never talk about the fact that the Islamic Republic is constantly trying to prevent Iranians from inside of the country from speaking out. And anyone who does speak out is arrested, jailed, and executed, right? And like he said, I mean, he's not exaggerating. Starlink is illegal. If you own Starlink, you can go to jail because Starlink will circumvent the VPN of the Islamic Republic. Guys, this is how brutal and savage the Islamic Republic is, right? Imagine, from where you are in the comfort of your own home in your Western civilized countries, many of you have Starlink or know people who have access to Starlink. Imagine if just by virtue of owning a Starlink, your government puts you in jail, tortures you, possibly executes you. That's what it's like living in occupied Iran, right? And yet there are people who are outside of Iran who will defend the Islamic Republic and defend this brutal and savage dictatorship. Iranians are literally being held hostage by the Islamic Republic, and yet non-Iranians are out here defending this brutal, savage Islamic dictatorship. Think about that. Think about that. Starlink is illegal in occupied Iran. What normal country does that? And yet there are people out there who are literally supporting our Islamic oppressors, right? But if anyone ever says, why do Iranian people want the Islamic Republic gone? One reason of, hundreds of thousands of reasons, Starlink is banned. Owning Starlink, having access to Starlink is gives the Islamic Republic grounds to arrest you, torture you, and execute you. Just think about that. Think about the savage brutality of this Islamic dictatorship.
Important it is. That's an indication of how critical it is for people to have access. That's one thing that free world can help us with. I talked to you about earlier about you don't need to have boots on the ground. The people are on the ground. You don't need to fund it by taxpayers' money, but you can repurpose frozen assets to sustain and fund, for instance, labor strikes in Iran, as an example. These are the things that are the tools of how you can galvanize a nation. This goes hands in glove in terms of what posture a foreign government can take to facilitate, because right now sanctions make it very difficult for anyone to send money back home to, let's say, sponsor the family of a political prisoner or somebody who wants to go on strike. These are areas that they can cooperate with the opposition. And these are the kind of substantial examples of what I'm giving you, just some examples of what can be done that they could implement in terms of a strategy and policy.
Why do you think that you are the right person at this moment to unite this opposition? Because you're the son of the Shah, also authoritarian regime, and many...
So stupid. Authoritarian regime. Like, he can't even formulate a proper sentence. He just, throws out this communist, Islamist, progressive, authoritarian regime. The guy probably doesn't even know that the late Shah of Iran gave women the right to vote in 1963. What sort of authoritarian regime gives women the right to vote? This guy is like a propagandist at this point.
People still remember what happened during that period of time.
No, we remember the facts, right? Like, this guy is pushing the communist and Islamist propaganda and narrative, right? He probably knows nothing about Cinema Rex.
Also in the West.
But I think that the names that has been chanted in Iran, apart from my grandfather and my father, is mine. And this is the name that they write on the walls in Iran as I speak. These are
100% true, right? Like, I've even had several live streams where I've shown you guys, right? There's only one name that Iranians in Iran are chanting today. That's Reza Pahlavi, right? They say Javid Shah. Javid Shah means long live the king. They say Reza Shah Ruhat Shah, referring to his grandfather. They say, Mohammad Shah Ruhat Shah, referring to his father. God bless your soul. And now they're saying, Ey Shah Iran, Bargard be Iran, which means, O king of Iran, return to Iran. The only images and videos you see coming out of Iran are people who are asking for the Shah to return to Iran, right? The thing is, all of these, most of this is in Farsi, right? So you don't actually see this stuff. But let me just show you one of the newest things that's trending, right? I just pull it. It was just here on my feed. Where is it? Let me pull it up here. So here we go. Let me go to Nufti. Nufti always has good things in English. So guys, if you want like accurate news about what's happening in Iran, English news, right? Because most of my news I get in Farsi. But if you want accurate news about what's happening in Iran, you want to, if you're on X, or, if you're on social media, you want to follow Nufti, okay? Nufti Iran, National Union for Democracy in Iran. They always have very good info and news and updates. So if you want, the unbiased truth, this is the account that you want to follow. They have a website and everything as well. But like, here's one example, right? So when His Royal Highness is referring to Iranians in Iran who are calling for him, or calling for his name, calling for him to return, or calling for his father's name, this is what they're referring to. This is what you don't see in the media, right? So, this is from October 21. Following breakdowns on the Tehran metro, citizens came out in protest of the regime and its failure to provide for Iran. Iranians are making their voices against the Islamic Republic undeniable, and they're ready to take Iran back. Reza Shah, bless your soul. So they're saying Reza Shah Ruhat Shad, which is, they're referring to his grandfather, right? They're saying bless your soul, right? And then where's the one? There's one from Madar Ismat today. Where's that one? Okay. I have to find that one. It was all over my feed. It was all over my feed earlier, but anyways, I'll find it here. Let me see if I can find. You guys can see my algo. It's basically all like, terrorists and stuff, because I like to get updates on that. Where is she? Where is she? Just saw it. All right. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay. So like, again, so this video just came out today. And this video is currently going viral on Iranian social media. So whether it's, Twitter posts in Farsi, or Instagram, or Facebook, or TikTok. So this is an old lady, okay? This is an old lady, and, she's known as Mother Ismat. She lost 11 family members to executions carried out by the Islamic regime in Iran in the 1980s, okay? So this old woman has lost 11 family members, okay? 11 of her family members were executed by the Islamic Republic. She has voiced her support for the restoration of Iran's monarchy and for Iran's king in exile, Reza Pahlavi II, the person that, we're watching this interview with, okay? She has called on Iranians to do the same and to chant Javid Shah, which means long live the king. Mother Ismat has become a prominent symbol of defiance and resilience against the terror regime's 47 years of oppression. She is currently hospitalized and undergoing treatment for cancer, right? So she's saying, my dear king, I'm Mother Ismat, I'm in the hospital. I wanted to tell you. She said, I want to tell you that I basically want you, with the throne and crown, okay? The people of Iran want you with the throne and crown, okay? So again, this is just one example out of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of these sorts of videos that are constantly coming out where Iranians say that they want the Shah to return and that they only trust him, right? But again, you're not going to see this. You're not going to see videos like this in English language media because it doesn't fit the Islamist communist narrative, right? Of course, you're going to see them on this channel because I'm here to give you the unfiltered truth. And I'm here to bridge that gap between what Iranians are saying in Farsi, versus what non-Iranians are hearing about Iran. So again, going back to this interview, I hope you can, now when he says that, people are calling my name, they're calling my grandfather's name, they're calling my father's name, it's not an exaggeration. This is something that is happening every single day. And, this video that I'm showing you is literally just the most recent example from today. Every day we're seeing hundreds of these types of videos come out on social media and be shared across social media. You just don't hear about it in English because it doesn't fit the communist, Islamist, anti-imperialist, jihadi narrative.
People are chanting and slogans. But I think that the names that has been chanted in Iran, apart from my grandfather and my father, is mine. And this is the name that they write on the walls in Iran as I speak. These are what people are chanting in slogans in Iran. And if you monitor that, that should be evidence of why should it be me as opposed to person X. And, that gives me the legitimacy to conduct this campaign.
But this was not a democracy back in the days. So
this guy is 100% lying. Iran was a constitutional monarchy. See, this is the frustrating part with these non-Iranians who are literally trying to Iran-splain our country to us. Like, how much of a bad faith actor do you have to be to just sit there and confidently claim that Iran was not a democracy? Iran was 100% a democracy. It was a constitutional monarchy. Guys, look up the 1906 Persian constitutional revolution. I have spoken about this in the past. I've even done a live stream on the Persian constitutional revolution, and you can find it right here. Let me find it. Islamic Revolution. Here we go. So let me just bring this up for you guys, okay? So for him to just claim that Iran was not a democracy, 100% a lie. If you go to my YouTube channel, you go to Iranians Rate Documentaries, you'll see here this one documentary here. It says 1979 Islamic Revolution. Underneath it, it says Persian Constitutional Revolution. I gave it a score of 7 out of 10. Guys, in 1906, there was a revolution, and that's when Iran became a constitutional monarchy with its first democratically elected parliament, by the way. Oh, and by the way, another thing I want to show you. Like this reporter is just 100% a bad actor. Guys, look at this. Okay. Let me show this one instead. Look at this. Profiles of women politicians. Do you see this? Do you see this image here? Let me zoom in here. Okay. Female MPs in the mid-1970s. Okay. Female members of parliament in Iran before 1979. If Iran was not a democracy, where did these women come from and what were they doing? Right? Like, do you see how blatantly these journalists just throw out these lies about Iran? Like, at this point, I mean, this is like blood libel that this guy is throwing out here. He just casually and confidently says, but Iran wasn't a democracy. Okay, if Iran wasn't a democracy, then who are these women? How did they get voted in, right? Who put them in there if it wasn't through democratic elections, right? But again, this is the jihadi, Islamist, communist propaganda that we Iranians have had to deal with, not just from journalists, but also from like ignorant people in the YouTube chat, right? Who for some reason think that they can Iran-splain our own country to us, right? Everyone seems to have an opinion on Iran, and unfortunately, 90% of the time, it's literally the wrong opinion. So again, ask yourself this question. How could Iran have been this authoritarian dictatorship when it literally had not just politicians, women politicians, and they looked like this, okay? Does this look like a country that is governed by an authoritarian dictatorship to you? I mean, come on, please. The level of ignorance is astounding, right?
And you're talking about freedom now, and
wait, see, so let's go back here because this German guy, this German guy is just not just pissing me off, but he's completely ignorant. And he's incredibly insulting as well. Like, he's just flat out rude here.
unite this opposition? Because you're the son of the Shah, and also to authoritarian regime, and many people still remember what happened during that period of time, also in the West.
Well, I think that the names that has been chanted in Iran, apart from my grandfather and my father, is mine. And this is the name that they write on the walls in Iran as I speak. These are what people are chanting in slogans in Iran. And if you monitor that, that should be evidence of why should it be me as opposed to person X. And, you know, that gives me the legitimacy to conduct this campaign.
But this was not a democracy back in the days.
Idiots.
So, and you're talking about you're talking about freedom now, and
whatever is the historical revision of what happened then, and I think today the Iranian people recognize what a.
So I'm so glad he used the word historical revision, right? Because that's exactly what's been going on for the last 47 years. The communists and the Islamists have engaged in historical, historic revisionism, right? They have tried to rewrite our history, and they have basically tried to push their historic revisionism on the world. And that's why a lot of people think that Iran used to be this authoritarian dictatorship. And then when we actually show them proof, we're like, no, this is what it was, right? Iran was not an authoritarian dictatorship. It was a constitutional monarchy. Here's what actually happened. It's just such a shock to people. It's almost like it just shatters. It shatters their framework of knowledge when it comes to Iran and the Middle East, to the point where I feel like they are so indoctrinated that they can't accept it. Even when we show them the facts, even when we show them the truth, it's almost as if they have gone so far down the rabbit hole when it comes to the Islamist and communist disinformation and propaganda that, you know, it's like they don't want to come out anymore. So when we even show them proof that goes against this false narrative that's put out by the jihadis and the communists, the only response they come up with is that, you know, we're lying, or, you know, we're engaging in conspiracy theories, right? Because it's just completely opposite to what they think they know. And guys, I'm telling you, everything you think you know about Iran is a lie. And, you know, at this point, we Iranians, we are tired of non-Iranians trying to Iran-splain our country to us by relying on sources that have engaged in historic revisionism for the last 47 years, right? Like, stop listening to the Islamists, stop listening to the communists, stop listening to armchair experts, and maybe go and do a little bit of independent research on your own to find out the truth. Because again, Iran became a constitutional monarchy in 1906. So how the hell could Iran have been this authoritarian dictatorship when we literally had a constitution? We had a parliament, we call it the Majlis. We had women politicians, we had prime ministers, we had ministers, we had elections, right? Like, this guy, 100% bad actor, 100% an idiot. And I'm glad that His Royal Highness is calling it out and calling it the historical revisionism that it is, because that's exactly what's been happening, is this historical revisionism.
To unite this opposition, because you're the son of the Shah, and also to authoritarian regime, and many people still remember what happened during that period of time, also in the West.
You know what? The way he's talking, I can tell, like, he doesn't even believe his own bullshit. He doesn't even believe his own bullshit, but he's obviously been paid to promote a certain narrative, right? Like, he's been paid to promote a certain agenda. He can't even ask he can't ask a question. Like, he's not even being cohesive. He's just like throwing out buzzwords, right? Like authoritarian dictatorship, like all this nonsense, right?
Well, I think that the names that has been chanted in Iran, apart from my grandfather and my father, is mine. And this is the name that they write on the walls in Iran as I speak. These are what people are chanting in slogans in Iran. And if you monitor that, that should be evidence of why should it be me as opposed to person X. And, you know, that gives me the legitimacy to conduct this campaign.
But this was not a democracy back in the days. So, and
whatever,
you're talking.
You can tell he doesn't even believe himself. He's like, this was not a democracy. Like, he doesn't even believe he does not even believe the own lies that are coming out of his mouth. Like, he knows. You can tell from the tone of his voice. He knows that he's just like spewing out pardon my language, bullshit.
You're talking about freedom now, and
whatever is the historical revision of what happened then, and I think today the Iranian people recognize what a crucial role my father and my grandfather played in modern Iran and giving everything that Iranian once enjoyed that they lost under this regime. All the liberties, women's rights, everything else. Was it a perfect system? No, it wasn't. But today people recognize that the country was going in a direction of prosperity, of progress, of modernity. And if that had continued without the revolution, Iran by now should have been the South Korea of the Middle East. Instead, we have become the North Korea of the Middle East. Why? Because that regime was gone, and instead, there was a regime that promised people free electricity, free rides on buses, and look at where it is now.
You know who else promised free electricity or free rides on buses? Mamdani. You guys in New York, you're screwed, by the way. So the Islamic regime came to power based on lies and taqiyya and these, communist socialist ideals, right? Remember that, guys. 1979 was a coup d'etat funded by the Soviets.
And people respond and react to that.
But there's also people remembering of their loved ones being in prison during.
That's so stupid. No, the only people who were in prison at the time were the communists and the Islamists. You know who was in jail at the time? Khamenei. Khamenei is the current supreme dictator of the Islamic Republic. He was in jail. So this is how you can tell this guy's a bad actor, right? Like he is more concerned. Like his focus is on defaming the Shah of Iran than he is on the current abhorrent human rights violations by the Islamic Republic. The Shah of Iran at the time had 3,000 people imprisoned. 3,000 people imprisoned, okay? And they were either communists or Islamists, right? All of them were terrorists, and thank God he had them imprisoned. The Islamic Republic today is responsible for the murder of almost 3 million Iranians since coming into power in 1979, right? Why isn't this man concerned about the fact that the current Islamic Republic is literally gassing schoolgirls? Yes, the Islamic Republic poisons school children as a way to deter their parents from going out of the streets and protesting. The Islamic Republic rapes women before executing them to make sure that their souls don't go to heaven. This is all documented. We have proof. We have documentary evidence. We have videos. We have photos. We have testimonies. No concern about that. But yet, for some reason, he's more interested in the Islamist communist lies, right? Of course, the Shah had people in prison. He said this freely and openly in all of his interviews in the 1970s. He said, I have 3,000 people imprisoned. And it's not like the Shah just, pointed a finger and said, you go to jail, you go to jail. They were imprisoned through the legal process. Every single one of those people went to court, and an independent judiciary decided whether or not they should go to jail. So it's not like the Shah put people in prison. People were arrested for crimes. They were tried before a court, an independent court, and then they went to jail. And this guy is acting as if like, this does not happen. This literally happens everywhere in the world. But these are the Islamist, communist, and leftist lies that people like this so-called reporter constantly put out there, right? And I cannot believe that this guy is now pushing and trying to promote this rhetoric and trying to trap His Royal Highness into this sort of, Islamist communist narrative, right? Like, shame on this guy.
The time your father was there. So, I mean,
the statistics that were announced by the opposition back then were grossly exaggerated. And that's why we have people now that have gone and studied all those aspects that were by no means friends of the previous regime. In fact, they were the opposition to my father's regime, from the left, from the Marxists, from the Maoists. And if you look at what they came up with their analysis, it draws a totally different picture than a specific narrative that was pushed by, at the time, what was a coalition of the red and the black, the Marxists and the Islamists, who painted a picture of Iran. And in fact, a lot of people in the Western world were impacted by that rhetoric.
It's not only a picture they painted. I mean,
I'm not here to represent the past, number one.
the other thing is this guy, he's just like throwing out like nonsense, but he has nothing to back it up, right? He's basically just making the same false, ignorant claims about the Shah with no evidence to back it up. Like this is just lazy journalism, incredibly disrespectful. And yeah, like he has nothing to back it up, not even a single shred of proof. Like he doesn't have numbers, he doesn't have facts, he doesn't have statistics, he doesn't even have a single name, by the way, a single name, right? But he's just spouting the same lazy propaganda that's been pushed by the communists and the Islamists for the last 47 years. Shame on that guy.
I'm my own man. I have my own vision, and that's why they respond to my message.
But you've been living in the West since you were 18. So how do you think you're the one for the people in Iran they can trust?
Because
so he already answered that question. So wow, what an idiotic comment to make. So he's like, well, you've been in the West since you're 18. Yeah, because if he goes back to Iran, he would be murdered. You idiot! Like, what is he supposed to do? Go back there and then be murdered? We want him outside of the country. He has to remain safe. Of course, we don't want him there because he is our hope. And again, he already answered this question because he said the people in Iran are chanting my name. And I literally just showed you just a few minutes ago a video that is going viral today. Okay, today, remember, don't forget the old lady, Mother Ismat. She's on her deathbed right now as we speak. Okay, let me show it to you. As a reminder, here you go. So this is Mother Ismat. She's on her deathbed. This video is going viral today because even today she's saying, we want the king back. We want you back. Reza Pahlavi, you are our hope, right? And yet this idiotic journalist is now claiming that because he was out of the country since he was 18, that he's not fit to rule. Like, do you see how they're just constantly attacking us? In whatever way, shape, or form they can. Like it is disgusting.
my life has been Iran for the past 46 years. I've been in touch with my fellow compatriots all this time. I've monitored every aspect from the day that Iran entered a war with Iraq. At the time I was in Cairo, my father had just died, and I volunteered to join the Iranian military to fight against Saddam Hussein and his invasion. And to this day, when today's kids, today's Gen Z, the children who were murdered during the Women Life Freedom Movement, their mothers were here in Munich 2 days ago. Their children were there 3 days ago. Who do you think they came and embraced? Whose name do you think that they bring up?
But
They bring my name up.
But there's even opposition groups in the past
So
years.
if they thought that I'm detached or I'm not connected to them, or I live in a different world, that's not their take. That's not their interpretation. There may be some people in the Western media that may characterize it as such, but the reality is not that. In fact,
but how do you know the reality? I'm painting.
This guy keeps on interrupting him, first of all. And then it's like, how do you know the reality? We are telling you, we are showing you. Like this guy is just, wow. Like, I have no words. Like, just completely ignorant, incredibly insulting. He's obviously like a far leftist, right? Because it's like, he's throwing out all of these statements with zero facts, anything, nothing to back up what he's claiming. His Royal Highness is, everything he says is backed with, evidence and testimony, and everything can be easily verified. And yet for some reason, he thinks that, he knows more. It's incredible to me.
Names on walls doesn't mean that the whole country is backing you or is behind you.
Well,
I mean,
wow. So, names on walls doesn't mean, okay, so this is the thing. This is the classic tactic that these leftists and Islamists do, right? They will attack the Shah. They will say, well, how do you know people want you? Writing names on walls isn't enough. It doesn't mean the whole country. But then you ask them this question. You say, well, okay, if not him, then who? If not him, who is going to be the leader? Who is going to lead the Iranian revolution? Who is going to overthrow the Islamic Republic? Give us a name. And they can't, because there is no one else, because Iranian people do not want anyone else. We as a nation, okay, we Iranians have already decided who we want to lead the Iranian national uprising. We have decided who we want to lead us in overthrowing the Islamic Republic and leading that transitional government, which is going to take us from a totalitarian Islamic dictatorship into a functioning democratic society. And we are going to determine what sort of democratic society we want, whether it's a republic or whether it's a constitutional monarchy. We will decide that ourselves at the ballot box through a national referendum, okay? But it is incredibly frustrating to have non-Iranians try and attack the legitimacy of our leader, right? When we have already determined as a nation who we want. They will continue to attack him, but they cannot provide any other name, right? So he keeps on saying, well, how do you know people support you? How do you know they don't? Can you give us any other name of any other person, right? Iranians inside of Iran are only chanting one person's name. That is his name. That is what the video is showing. That is what the photos are showing. That is the documentary evidence coming out of the country. No other name, no other person. And yet, for some reason, these lefty journalists are still trying to undermine his credibility. And by doing so, they're actually damaging the movement, right? Like he's not just attacking King Reza Pahlavi. He is attacking 80 million Iranians who are trying to tell the world he is our leader. We want him. We trust him. We don't want anyone else, right? And ultimately, that decision is up to us. And we as a nation have already made that decision as to who is going to be our leader, who is going to lead us in overthrowing the Islamic Republic. So this guy, right, instead of just listening, he's now gone on this very, very aggressive attack, probably because he just does not like the fact that we all support His Royal Highness.
You
This
know,
is not
then,
numbers or facts.
then I would refer you to some of the polls that have been made about where do I figure in terms of the overall perception. And if you look at that, I don't know exactly what the number is, but the second person.
I know what the number is, guys. Okay, let me pull up the poll for you, okay? Because again, everything that His Royal Highness is saying, it's fact, right? Let me pull it up here. 80%. Here we go. Guys, look at this. Let me remove this. Okay, so you see this. So this was a poll. Okay, this was a poll that was done about 2-3 years ago. It was done by this leftist institution called Gammon. Gammon, they're actually like very, very far left. So Gammon themselves do not support His Royal Highness. Okay, they're very leftist, almost like socialist, Marxist-leaning organization based out of in Europe. They did an internal poll, okay, of who people inside of Iran support. And look at this. This is from like 3 years ago, okay? 80% of Iranians in occupied Iran support His Royal Highness, King Reza Pahlavi. The Islamic Republic here is at 0.3%. And then, the jihadi communists are at 0%, right? But look at this, like 1.6, 0.6, 0.6, 0.30. 80% support His Royal Highness, okay? Do you see this? Like how much clearer does it need to get, right? Like how much more proof do people need? If that journalist actually did his job and he actually bothered to look into the polls, not polls from the Islamic Republic, because that is a brutal Islamic dictatorship that lies, right? But if you look at the independent polls, even the leftist organizations who do not like His Royal Highness cannot deny the fact that at least 80% of Iranians support him. So again, you can very clearly see how the reporter is deliberately engaging in disinformation, and everything that His Royal Highness is saying is factually accurate and correct. So when he is referring to those polls, this right here is an example of one of those polls where at least 80% of Iranians support him and trust him. So what more do you need? Right? But this is the lies, right? The lies and the gaslighting that we Iranians have been dealing with from these ill-informed bad actors for the last 47 years, who try not only to engage in historic revisionism, but they also try to Iran-splain our own country to us as if we, for some reason, don't have the ability to determine for ourselves what we want, right?
Closest to me as far as being considered as someone,
Let me go back here again.
but
Right?
the reality is not that. In
Well,
fact,
But how do you know the
look-
reality? I'm painting names
How do we know the reality? Because we have polls like I just showed you. God, I hate this guy.
on walls doesn't mean that the whole country is backing you or is behind you. You know,
well,
I mean,
you
this
know,
is not
then-
numbers
then-
or facts.
Then I would refer you to
We have numbers and facts. I just showed you that poll. That was from a few years ago. At least 80% of Iranians support His Royal Highness. That's a poll.
some of the polls that have been made about where do I figure in terms of the overall perception. And if you look at that, I don't know exactly what the number is, but the second person closest to me as far as being considered as someone is not even recording in the double digits in most of the polls that have been done. So if you, to the extent that you're willing to be
Right? So again, I'm referring to this one here, right? So here he is at 80%, and this is the person that's next to him, not even remotely in the double digits. In fact, he's not even at 2%. He's at 1.6%. Like, how much more clearer does it get? Like, does this not show you exactly who Iranians want? Like, it's not even close. It's not even close. So we have the facts, we have the stats, we have the polls. It's all there. And yet these so-called journalists in the West continue to deliberately ignore the truth.
whatever polls are showing. I think that's another way of demonstrating where do I stand vis-a-vis this popular response. And I'm not running for office anyway. It's not that I'm trying to campaign for anything. But when people look at me as a father figure, and that's what they call me these days, by the way, most of these kids, when they talk to me, they address me as father, meaning that they see that I can be unconditionally having their back. And I've been around for 46 years, and they value that. They appreciate that. Then, yeah, he could have gone and lived his life, but he hasn't.
Why is
For
it that
46 years, he's been there fighting for us. And I think that's the recognition.
So that reporter is obviously not listening, right? Like, he's just waiting for an opportunity to interject and just ask the next question. He's not listening at all to the answers being provided by His Royal Highness here.
That's the affection. That's the trust. That's the trust. Most important element. People have lost complete trust to anything, but they trust me. You know why? Because I've been consistent in my message, because never wavered from my commitment to their liberation, and it has never been about me.
Why is it that even opposition groups in the past, I remember 2022, criticizing you and saying Western politicians seeing in you the solution for Iran are very naive because they wouldn't see.
Why don't you ask those opposition groups? And by the way, where are those opposition groups today? Maybe those opposition groups are part of the controlled narrative of the Islamic Republic. You know what we call those opposition groups? We call them the fake opposition. We call them the controlled opposition. Those opposition groups are more concerned about keeping the Islamic Republic in power, okay? And so that's why they criticize the Shah. Those opposition groups, if they were legitimate opposition groups, they would be attacking the Islamic Republic. The very fact that this journalist is now coming out and talking about how these opposition groups are attacking the Shah, right? That should clue in for you guys. That should clue in. Anyone who's attacking our leader as opposed to the Islamic Republic, they are part of the Islamic Republic. They are working for the Islamic Republic. Again, they are part of the fake opposition, right? The Islamic Republic spends billions of dollars on disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, lobby groups, pundits, like journalists, everything you can think of, right? I mean, if he wants to know why these so-called opposition groups are attacking His Royal Highness, shouldn't he go and ask those opposition groups? Why is he like, how would the Shah of Iran know why these opposition groups are attacking him? Like, this is just a ridiculous line of questioning right now.
The opposition against you and against what happened during the Shah time in Iran.
Well, many of them, if they had said that, were now standing with me a couple years ago, looking at what we can do together. Even people who were clearly part and advocate of the regime have come out and say, we need to work with Reza Pahlavi. He's the only person who can take us to the point where we are finally liberated. Former, you want to call them enemies or adversaries, are today in our camp. Not my camp. It's a national project. This is not about me yet again. It's not about the monarchy. It's not about the past. It's about liberating our nation so we could have a secular, democratic future, which is the aspiration of my fellow compatriots.
Wouldn't it be important, if you want to unite everybody, that you also talk about what happened during the Shah time?
I have. I've written.
What an ignorant, stupid question. We already know what happened during the Shah's time. The Shah was amazing. We love the Shah, right? Again, like this guy is trying to like Iran-splain our country to us. He's trying to Iran-splain our history to us. The Shah's only mistake, guys, leading up to the 1979 Islamic Revolution is that he was not hard enough on the communists and the Islamists. The Shah's only mistake is that he showed too much mercy. The Shah's mistake is that he tried to appease the terrorists. He tried to negotiate with the terrorists. And you know what they did? They stabbed him in the back. They took over our country and they turned it into a 7th century Islamic hellhole. That was the only mistake the Shah ever made.
Books about it. I'm on the record. I've been critical of many aspects of what happened before. If they only choose not to be selective about where it is that they use a quote by me and where they choose not to, because it happens to, in fact, debunk their entire narrative about the past. I've been on the record. I point you to my books, my interviews, and I've done that. So as far as that argument goes, I think the evidence is right there for everyone to see. And I'm not shying away from it. If you ask me right now what aspect I would criticize, I would still do. But this is not about writing history.
Yeah,
and I tell people, I'm not here to write history. I'm here to make history. And we are making history. And that's why yesterday's foes have become today's allies. Because we all recognize that we have to look forward. Learning, of course, from the mistakes of the past, so we can build a better future.
What was the biggest mistake, if you call it mistake, of your father?
Getting more participation, and I think that the level of economic development was not necessarily parallel to the level of liberalizing the system. Not that my father didn't want that. Let me be very clear about that. Why would he send all these young kids to be educated in Western universities, bring together with them the very same values that the free world has, if he didn't have the intent to, in fact, liberalize the country at the same time? He did that. My father implemented programs that were more socialist than any socialist
now you're not talking about his mistakes. Now you're talking again about what he did right.
Wow, like this guy, okay? He just said what the mistake was. The mistake was that he wasn't, like, I guess, managing the modernization fast enough or slow enough or whatever the case might be. Like this guy is completely antagonistic here right now. Like this is what an utter backstabbing, idiotic fool this so-called journalist is right now. Like the only thing he's interested in is smearing the Pahlavi name. That's exactly it, right? Like he's not interested in learning. He's not interested in being objective, right? He completely ignores the fact that the Shah was literally paying for Iranian university students to go and get a Western education so that they could then come back to Iran and contribute to society. What sort of authoritarian dictator does that? What sort of authoritarian dictator pays for its young people to go and get an education abroad to then come back and serve the country? Who does that? No authoritarian dictator does, and yet he just conveniently ignores that fact because he just wants to push this narrative of the Shah of Iran being an authoritarian dictator. That's all he wants. That's all he wants to push forward, right? The authoritarian dictators are the ones who are currently occupying Iran. It wasn't the Shah of Iran.
I was asking you, what was his biggest mistake?
I
What
said
about the prisons? What about the people?
The
who...
level of
There were the prisons, right? Again, like so this guy just basically wants His Royal Highness to just accept the propaganda that's being put out by the communists and the Islamists and the jihadis, right? But of course, he's not going to admit to that because it's all false. It's not true, right? Like this journalist is literally trying to force the Shah of Iran right now to admit to things that never actually happened. It is utter nonsense. Like this right now is like pure trash. Like I'm surprised, not surprised, but like the level of patience that His Royal Highness is showing right now, the level of patience and grace. I mean, this is why we have him as our leader, because he has to constantly deal with the lies, the propaganda, the fake news, right? The communist narrative. He constantly has to deal with this, right? And I mean, instead of focusing on freeing Iran, this journalist just wants to talk about why the Shah was bad. Well, the Shah was not bad. Get over it. We love the Shah. The Shah was amazing. That's why people in Iran chant his name. The only people who don't like the Shah are the Islamists and the communists, the one who ruined our country and are still ruining our country to this day. And this journalist right now is being either a useful idiot for them, or he's being paid and he has ulterior motives here.
liberalization, but also understand that this was in the climate of the Cold War, and many countries who lived to the life under Soviet dictatorship knew that there were elements in there, like the Tudeh party, which was a communist party, taking direct order from Moscow to undermine our sovereignty and interfere in Iran affairs in the name of being, not participating in the political sphere. But there were also innocent victims of that liberal expectation that also faced the same type of put aside. And I think that was a mistake, because that was one of the elements that created the political crisis. However, if you were to talk to these elements who said, well, the system was not free, liberty was not as such, we were not doing this, we're not doing that, it was perhaps political liberties, but there are also a lot of other aspects that did exist that now when they look back and they say, we should have taken the opportunity when the Shah finally said that, okay, I'm going to step back and allow for that to take place. Some people may argue, maybe by the time it was too late, but he did recognize that. And the opposition today recognizes that we should have taken advantage of that new opening rather than rally behind Khomeini as if he could be the instrument of Iran's liberalization. And by the time they recognize what the true nature of the regime was, it was by then too late. So, it goes both ways. You can be critical of what went wrong. I admit it. I volunteer it. I recognize it. So does the opposition. So it's not a one-way street. I think the opposition of the regime in the past also bears some responsibilities in the sense of where they went wrong as well. So I think rather than being in a position to accuse one another of wrongdoing, we should both sides recognize where we did right and where we did wrong. And as a result, understand why it is that now we need to work together. So not only we achieve what we always wanted, but don't repeat the mistakes that we made before
For
collectively. So it's not a one-way street. It
Stop
has to be.
talking over him.
And that's the spirit of my campaign. It's based on national reconciliation. What does national reconciliation mean? It means that the people who until now thought that they cannot be on the same boat could in fact live under the same roof and be an instrument for a better future, as opposed to a stumbling block towards that future. So that's the nature of what Iran had to go through in 46 years. And the fact that at the end of the tunnel, we all recognize that this is a gift to have had this experience, sometimes having paid a very heavy price, but it puts us in such a better shape now to then address the future. That's what I'm working on with the opposition, including those who yesterday were opposed to my father's regime.
You said it could happen very fast.
Mm-hmm.
I still would argue if there needs to.
Who are you to argue? First of all, you know nothing about Iran. You're basically a communist Islamist mouthpiece. You're not even Iranian. So who are you to argue? Like your opinion is irrelevant. Maybe instead of like just pontificating, you should just listen to Iranians and actually take the opportunity to learn something. Again, this guy is a classic example of these so-called armchair experts who think they know our country more than we do, who think they understand Iran more than we do, and they are constantly trying to Iran-splain our country to us as if we are somehow these ignorant, illiterate savages who don't understand anything or don't know anything, right? Like, who are you to argue? Who are you? Gosh, like, this guy is like completely pissing me off. Like, what an idiot.
A special momentum,
Mm-hmm.
something, what happened inside the country. Another bombing campaign, I don't know, but like, what is it? What needs to happen? And that the uprising is really happening.
Again, I think part of it is an external component. So,
like what?
Like, let's say if snapback was to be implemented, how much more it would curtail the regime's abilities. But
the external component, I mean, he already spoke about that earlier in the interview, you idiot. He was speaking about maximum pressure, right? Prescribing the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The external element is having, governments recognize that the Islamic Republic is a terrorist entity and sanction them. That's what it is. Like, he literally just said that.
But also if there's an actual dimension to the maximum support that I've been calling for all along, in what way it would have direct impact on people's ability to better organize
could it happen,
themselves?
for example?
Well, this is the reason how it can be accelerated rather than delayed.
But
You're asking me how soon, I'm telling you how it can be accelerated.
But we talked about Khamenei, for example.
Why is this guy constantly talking over the like so incredibly disrespectful? Oh my gosh.
Example, if he would be killed in the next weeks, months, the next year, is that something where you could think?
I don't think it's a stumbling block.
Oh my God, Major. This reporter is really upset he wasn't born before he could join the Red Army. 100%. Like, oh my gosh, like this guy is just, what an idiot.
It may in fact had a positive ramification in the sense that the regime is even more fragile in terms of finding the replacement, so to speak. Some people would like to see him alive to see the demise of his regime and face the music and answer in a court of law for all the crimes he has committed. So some people, in fact, would like him to one day see that. So honestly, if you ask me, I don't care either way whether Khamenei is alive or dead. The regime is dying. And his regime is dying. And the people of Iran are seeing this as an opportunity not to be missed. And we are doing everything we can as Iranians to mobilize ourselves. We hope, however, that the world this time is not going to say, wait a second, we have to somehow figure out a diplomatic way out. And if that doesn't work, we're going to go and strike Iran again militarily. And once again, the Iranian people are not part of the alternative analysis and equation.
Did it hurt you with the opposition aligning with Israel and the US during the bombing campaign? Because also many civilians died in June and people...
Well, we didn't have to align. And understand one thing, I have warned time and again, not only my fellow compatriots, but also the world, that if you continue a political appeasement vis-a-vis this regime, if you continue thinking that you can resolve the problem by negotiating with them, if you continue by releasing funds that they shouldn't have had access to begin with, which happened under the Biden administration, over $200 billion came to the hand of the regime to use it to maintain its proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas. And October 7th was not a coincidence. It was a result of that. So we then are forced with a scenario that some countries, like Israel, would have to take a step to alleviate the problem. I warned about that it should not come to a conflict. But you jumped directly, yet again, from failed diplomacy to now military conflict. And all these years before we reached what happened a couple of months ago, I've been telling Americans, Europeans, and other people, there is a third way. And that third way is to help the Iranian people.
Could Israel help to overthrow this regime?
Yes, they can. So can America, so can Europe. It all depends on how you reassess your policy and your strategy. The strategy should no longer be based on appeasement and trying to find a scenario of diplomatic resolution.
Could, at the end of our interview, we're in Germany right now, is there anything what Germany should do, what the chancellor should do, the foreign minister should do right now?
I think leadership has been, in terms of courageous leadership, taking a strong position, really absent in the European theater when I come to think of it. Look, we've seen time and again how critical it is to have the element of true strength mobilize and change the momentum and face of history. The last time I saw it was when Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher came and pretty much forced their hands on Mr. Gorbachev, and ultimately it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Thatcher couldn't do it alone. Ronald Reagan couldn't do it alone. And if you look at Donald Trump right now, and if you're looking at what Putin is doing in Moscow, what the Communist Party is doing in China, what in counterbalance to those blocs is the West doing? The West right now, and most of Europe, is not showing the kind of courage it takes to be strong and not allow a regime to blackmail you by taking hostages, leading you to think that they are not honest about coming to negotiation, because meantime Iranian people are getting killed and the rest of the region is suffering, and you have all sorts of human situation developing. Gaza is not off my radar. I really feel bad for what's happening there as a consequence of this status quo. And I think part of the blame should come to the very same governments that through their laissez-faire and appeasement have been responsible somewhat in the tragedy that is happening now. Because they allowed for the regime in Iran to survive all these years by funding these terrorists, by funding those elements of repression that then forces the government to react. So let's one time blame not the victims, but those who are responsible for this crime. And there's none other than the Islamic regime in Iran that some in the West still think they can reason with. And all this time, I'm saying you have wasting time, and all of that means more human casualties. All of this means more forced migration that Europe can hardly handle, all of because the status quo continuing. Why don't you think that you can, for once in 46 years, alter your thinking and anticipate that what could be the benefit of this change? You want to make sure it's not mayhem. We have a solution for that. You want to make sure it's not crisis after collapse. It's not going to be another Iraq. Every area of concern that you may have, we have an answer for it. All you need to do is to decide to discontinue a policy of appeasement and throwing a lifeline to the regime, to the benefit of now standing in solidarity with this country. And you will see that most of the problems will be resolved that will not need you to sacrifice some principles or, for that matter, have to utilize force. Because the biggest guarantee are the people of Iran once liberated that will demonstrate that, unlike this regime, they are not a threat to the Western world and Western values and Western belief. In fact, they espouse it. That there are, in a population in Germany, the chancellor knows that there's almost 500,000 Iranians who are now German citizens who live in this country, many of whom want to go back to Iran once liberated. And they are all successful entrepreneurs, doctors. They're part and parcels of what makes Germany a strong country. You have actually human assets that could then be the best ambassadors for the relationship between our liberated country and a country like Germany. And any other country in Europe probably will have the same kind of sentiment. All it takes is for the kind of leadership he said, we have had it with this regime. Basta, as the Spanish would say. It is time we give the Iranian people the opportunity that they well deserve. You don't have to do anything beyond that. Just recognize that delaying the problem by thinking that this regime will this time offer you the solution is the wrong approach. It's just wasting time. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you and the Iranian people all the best. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. So that reporter, obviously a bad actor, ignorant, like he got incredibly aggressive towards the end of that interview. But, you know, thankfully his Royal Highness was able to put him in his place, right? And that is why we as an Iranian nation support him. We trust him. And that is why he is the legitimate leader of the Iranian opposition, because he has been facing this type of criticism for the last 47 years, and he deals with it with such grace and dignity and eloquence, right? He puts people in their place, and he always comes from a place of truth and facts. You know, again, as I showed you guys, you know, he has a support of over 80% of Iranians, right? Like this poll here was from a few years ago, and you can see not even a few years ago, he was at 80%. That support has risen exponentially, guys, risen exponentially. I see a comment here from Major. Reza II is a better speaker than almost every world leader I have ever seen. No, 100%. And not only that, Major, he actually is fluent in at least 3 languages, English, French, and Farsi. And what I'm going to do is, I believe, you know, at another point in my daily live streams, I'm going to actually play for you guys his media presser that he did this past summer, where he was literally fielding questions from journalists in real time in both English, French, and Farsi all at the same time. So he is incredibly educated, incredibly well-spoken, and we as Iranians are very, very lucky and blessed to have him, because without him, we will not be able to overthrow the Islamic Republic. And that is why he is the constant target of smear attacks, of disinformation, of misinformation, of propaganda, right? Because the Islamic Republic views him as the only legitimate and credible threat. This is why we Iranians support him overwhelmingly, as I have shown. So guys, thank you so much for joining this live stream today. And just a quick reminder, my book is available for pre-sale. It comes out on December 7. But if you've enjoyed my viral video clips, you know, Iranian here with another pro tip from the Middle East, make sure that you order my book. It would make an amazing Christmas present as well. And it just gives you a primer, you know, an overview on the Middle East. Now, I just want to be very clear. This book is not meant for people who are experts on the Middle East. So, you know, if you're knowledgeable and if you understand what's going on, probably not, you know, the best book for you. The intended audience here is people who are not familiar with the Middle East, who have, you know, heard about it in the news, don't really know what's going on. You're not really sure where to turn to. This book is sort of a, you know, Middle East 101, meant for those who are not as familiar with it. So you can find it on Amazon. If you're watching this live stream on X, I've included the link in a post below my live feed. If you're watching this on YouTube, then of course the link to pre-order the book is in the YouTube description. All right, guys, I will see you. For those of you who join me for my evening shows, I will see you later tonight on my, you know, evening live stream where we basically watch documentaries about Iran and we rate them. So for those of you joining tonight, I'll see you then. For those of you who are not and are joining me for my daily live streams, I will see you tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern for another episode of The Goldie Show. And as always, guys, Payande Iran and Javid Shah.